Does the seconder wish to speak now or later?
Madam Speaker, I wish to debate right now.
The Honorable Member for Kanfinsa.
Madam Speaker, allow me first of all to thank the mover of the motion for the great thought that he has brought today to this very important August House regarding the disposal of public assets through auction. I am aware that whenever motions come to this August House, Madam Speaker, sometimes the motions are ambiguous, resulting in people not actively supporting the motion. So I'll try to simplify once again what the mover is basically trying to suggest today. Madam Speaker, Section 46 of the Public Finance Management Act, which law was passed in 2018, provides for different ways of disposing of assets. And I'm saying this, Madam Speaker, because we might have ambiguity if we don't simplify what really happens. So, Madam Speaker, government has got options which they can use if they want to dispose of public assets. The first option under 2A is basically to transfer an asset from one ministry to another, meaning the asset still remains within the state. The second option which the state has when disposing of an asset, Madam Speaker, is through public tender, meaning if it is in the view of government that this asset is no longer useful, there is no need for an auction. They can still decide to dispose it off through public tender. Option C, Madam Speaker, under Section 46 of the law, is what the Honorable MP for Bahati is referring to. The MP is basically saying, with all these other options available, when it comes to auction, we want Zambians to participate only in ensuring that Zambians have the advantage. So when I look at this motion, Madam Speaker, I look at the provisions of the law. I look at Section 44, Section 42, and Section 45. Madam Speaker, the provisions are sufficient. Section 45 allows the Minister of Finance to come up with regulations, meaning we don't need to come back to this August House, Madam Speaker, to change the law. The law is very clear. Honorable Minister of Finance can simply issue appropriate instructions that in line with Section 45, Zambians only should participate when it comes to auctioning. An auction, Madam Speaker, is where you are buying chairs that have already been used, a vehicle that is no longer useful.
Order, Honorable Member.
May the Honorable Member continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was indicating to the August House that with regards to disposal of public assets, there are about 6 or 7 options which government has, and one of the options is to use public auction. Now, Mr. Speaker, public auction is provided for under Section 46 of the Public Finance Management Act. The same act which was passed in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, empowers the Minister of Finance to come up with regulations for disposal. What am I trying to say, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the good people of Kanfinsa are simply saying we don't need to come back to Parliament to change any law, because the Public Finance Management Act empowers the Minister of Finance to develop regulations on any disposal of any public asset. I am aware, for instance, Mr. Speaker, that there have been many Zambians that have wanted to procure items that are of no use to government. These assets sometimes lose value. Sometimes the cost of maintaining some of these assets may be too much, and government has got almost 7 options. They can decide to issue a public tender, which can invite everyone to participate, or they can look at Section 46(2)(c), which simply allows for public auction. And the mover of the motion, speaking on behalf of the many Zambians that are disadvantaged when it comes to public auctions, that why can't we restrict Because if we are going to auction public assets, there are high chances, Mr. Speaker, that these assets are no longer of use to government. Now, if assets are of no longer use to government, it simply means we should allow Zambians to have the first privilege to offer what they have. So the mover is simply saying, government, you normally have assets which you no longer need. Do not sell these assets to everyone. Consider Zambians to have the first right of refusal, which simply means Zambians will go for the reserve price. If they can't afford the reserve price, then government will develop regulations according to Section 46. So I felt the obligation, Mr. Speaker, to simplify the motion. The motion is simply saying government has got a lot of options on how they would want to sell public assets. Can they isolate just one option and give the consideration to Zambians only? The mover is not saying all the provisions should be for Zambians. He's simply saying if you want to sell any item through public auction, because a public auction simply means even a foreigner can offer. If a foreigner wants to buy an old van at the Ministry of Transport and Communications, for instance, that equipment should only be given first consideration to a Zambian. And that's what the mover is basically saying. What that will do, Mr. Speaker, is that Zambians will have the advantage to afford assets which government no longer needs, have the advantage to utilize those pieces of equipment. If it's office furniture, the Zambians should be given the first option to buy. And that is what the mover of the motion is saying. Are we saying we need to change the law? Mr. Speaker, we don't need to change the law. The Public Finance Management Act, in the manner in which it was crafted, and I'm happy some of the members of parliament that are present today were present when the law was being crafted. The law was crafted in such a manner that it gives the Minister of Finance the powers to simply say, these assets will be sold through public tender, so public tender is everyone. These assets, however, because they've lost value, we are going to sell them through a public auction to Zambians only. And that is what the mover is simply saying, that can we give Zambians the first consideration if we are going to dispose of any asset at a value which is determined through a public auction. So, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that those that will debate this very important motion will view it from the perspective of the many Zambians that participate in public auctions. Why should we disadvantage our own Zambians in as far as buying items that no longer have use, items that have lost value, that Zambians would want to utilize? Mr. Speaker, the people of Kamfinsa support the motion that has been moved by the people of Bahati. I thank you.